In this episode, Manuela Testolini and I talk about building a world that our descendants would be proud to live in. Manuela is the founder and president of the In a Perfect World Foundation that she's been leading for 17 years. And it's been dedicated to empowering the next generation by creating and supporting programs that provide education, mentoring, and artistic expression to underserved and at-risk youth around the world. This conversation is so important to me because Manuela has this steady focus on finding the unlimited potential in young people. That's where we have to start. As Femfluencers, and probably as fellow empaths, which Manuela and I are, we have the gift of seeing people in a deeper way and finding solutions that will support that and create a better world. So she's going to talk about how she found her own leadership, her own rhythm to approach people for support in her organization, which, by the way, nonprofits and for-profits need the same level of support, just in a different way. And how a simple question, in a perfect world, what do you need or want? That question alone has shifted thousands and thousands of not just children, but adults into actually being clear on what they need. So this conversation is so important for those of you that want contribution to be a big part of your Femfluence, and how Manuela has been able to sustain her boutique nonprofit and help so many for-profits in the process as she was on her journey. So watch us, check her out. She has an incredible story, and you'll see why I was so fascinated and wanted to put her on this special series. Hi, Manuela.
Hello.
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy you're here on Femfluence Radio.
So glad to be here.
Okay, so one of the first questions I open up with is, what's your Femfluence? And by Femfluence, I mean, what's your superpower? What's something that people tell you is your superpower?
My superpower is, or my Femfluence is really unlocking the unlimited potential of young people. Because I feel like it's in there and they just really need somebody who's that catalyst to help it come out.
This is so perfect. Now I'm mega intrigued, because how did that come about? Where did that Femfluence come from? What's the origin of that?
You know, I think that I'm a super empath. So, and I thought everyone else saw things the way I did until as I got older, I realized that some people see things on different levels. But, you know, as a nonprofit founder, I found myself always going a little bit deeper than others did with things. And, you know, for me as a kid, even just being exposed to you know, international travel, because my mom is Egyptian, so I spent summers, you know, in a third world country, and I had all these different experiences that I don't think a lot of kids have, and it really developed sort of that awareness and ability to not only see what's happening, but to start thinking about solutions, and then start to feel like, how do you empower those people to be the solution drivers versus us helping and then being passive beneficiaries.
I met you at another event and immediately was so struck by the story you told us about one of the biggest kind of like visual images or scenarios that drives your organization to make the change that it does. Can you share that story with us?
Yeah. So before I started In a Perfect World, I was a leader at another private foundation where I got to do a lot of great things. I got to write a lot of checks to nonprofit organizations that needed support. And I didn't feel fulfilled in doing that, because I found that my heart's really with working hand to hand with people. And so as I was supporting these grassroots organizations and making sure they were, you know, shelter had their pantry stocked and the beds filled and what have you, I realized that there was no discussion happening with the beneficiaries about what they personally needed to make their situation more palatable. So I started asking this question in a perfect world of the people in these different places. And I started asking adults, and those conversations were great, but really my heart is with kids. And so I started to tailor those conversations a little bit. And, you know, kids will tell you the things you expect. I'm going to date myself, but they would say, you know, I want a Game Boy. I want to go to Disneyland. I want to go to, you know, fly in a rocket ship. And so I knew I could fulfill some of those things. And so I started to do that. But then I met one kid who just changed everything because his response was that all he wanted was a blue crayon. And I thought he must not understand what I'm saying. I said, you know, pretend I'm a genie or a magician and I could sort of snap my fingers and get you whatever you wanted. And he never looked up from this coloring page and just repeated that he just wanted this blue crayon. So I went to find the mom, and it was a domestic violence shelter. I found her, and I told her what our interaction was. And I said, what's the story? And she said she and her son had left this domestic violence situation in the middle of the night. She grabbed all the things that she thought were most important to him. So the Tonka truck, the teddy bear, the box of crayons, and left behind this poor child's blue crayon. And through a face full of tears, she's telling me, first of all, thank you for asking my kid what he needs, because in her mind, now that they were in a safe space, that was enough. And she never thought to ask him what else he might need to make his situation better. And what I realized was like, hey, a kid's perfect world can sometimes be really easily fulfilled, and we just are not asking enough. And so I wanted to bring the kids into the conversation. So I used this experience with this little boy to really catapult my mission, which is to get kids to start talking about what their perfect world looks like, but then also to give them the tools to get there. Yeah. So we started doing these, what we would call arts empowerment festivals, which we would never tell the kids they were that, but there was free arts day at shelters and with foster care agencies, where the kids could do things like create wish boxes. So we're, kind of drawing out what they see, what they wish for themselves, or change the world banners. And those answers via the art projects started to get more and more profound. It's still simple, but profound, because, I had a little girl who drew watermelon. That was in her perfect world. She just wanted watermelon. And I thought, like, what an odd choice. When the other kids were asking for things. And in talking to her, I found out that she and her family were refugees from another country. And she had watermelon every day in her home country. And she hadn't had watermelon in Minneapolis. And I thought, it's just like a really simple thing to fulfill, to make her just feel home. Yeah. And to feel better. And then I kept asking. And then I had a little girl who told me that in her perfect world, she just wanted to have a picnic with her family in the park. And I thought, well, that's an easy thing. I mean, we could do that. And then we find out that the park is really not suitable for families. And so we took this little girl, rather than, yes, we could do a park cleanup and situate it for her, but we took her and let her be the leader of the community cleanup, and had her rally not only the community, but the families at the shelter, which was another eye-opening moment for me, because the response I got was that the people living at the shelters were never asked to participate in solutions. They were always passive beneficiaries. They're always receiving food, receiving support, and not really asked to participate. And so getting them involved in that was really pivotal, and eye-opening for me. Like, okay, this is the path, right? We're going to have first of all, have the kids lead, but have them rally the grown-ups around them. And then, I have my blue crayon boy, and then I have this awesome boy named Jalen, who was drawing. I was looking over his shoulder, and he was drawing on his Change the World banner. And he wrote that if he could change the world, he would buy homes for all the kids that didn't have them. And so I asked Jalen, who didn't have a home because he's living in a shelter, why he chose to get homes for everyone else instead of himself. And he said, because I already know how it feels not to have a home, and I would never want another kid to feel that way. And I thought, there's some really profound wisdom coming from kids. And really at the heart of all of those things is empathy. Like, the kids are born with natural empathy, and it gets dulled. Like, as we grow up, just by the things we're bombarded with. And as grown-ups, we try to deprogram some of those things, deprogram that apathy later, which is a lot harder than helping kids strengthen their empathy muscle and to keep it there and present. So that's been our mission, is really to keep kids the empathetic, awesome change makers that we know they can be, and to pour into them with mentoring and access to education and self-expression, so that it naturally comes about from it compels them to act in service.
It centers them.
It's
It's so incredible. How long have you been doing this?
I don't know. It's my 17th year. So I started this when I was 12.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Right.
Wow, that's amazing. Because also what I'm getting out of it, first of all, fellow empath and feeler, and I'm so glad to meet another alien. This is very exciting. And because you're so active in the organization, I also know you're a mother, and I'm curious, being as on the field as you are with these kids and changing communities, activating them one project, it sounds like at a time, deeply. How do you find space for joy or creativity or fun in your life?
That is a constant balancing act, because I mean, being an empath is a blessing and a curse,
Oh,
right?
yes.
So it's really hard to just sort of do a project and shut it off and, do other things. And so my brain is constantly thinking about the next thing to do and how to help. And so I truly do find joy in working with kids and seeing their light bulbs go off. Now that I have my own kids and they're in our programs as well, I see them leading, and that definitely creates a lot of joy for me. But I really have to deliberately carve out time to stop the noise. I have to have quiet time. I have to take time for self-care, which is a hard thing to do. I'm a Virgo and an empath. It's
Woo!
like double whammy. So I'm trying to find the balance. It's tough.
Well, what's cool is, this is a special series I'm doing to kick off Femfluence season 2. And it's funny because every single woman that I've had on this seat before you, one common denominator is when I ask that question, we say we're joyful about our work. And I think women, as a general thing, feel some shame around loving work or what we're doing because we're expected, not necessarily by our own family, maybe, but by society, I would say, is like to be able to hold so many things and that work shouldn't be one of our top priorities. But I actually only want to hang out intimately with other women who they also enjoy their work, because then we can pour into each other how we can help spread our message, because that's what we're all doing is change making. Even as an entrepreneur or somebody who's a leader of a nonprofit, we're solutions people. We exist because there's problems that need to be solved. And so I'm just excited to hear that you're a fellow ambitious woman, a mom who also appreciates her work. That's why you're doing it. Because a lot of times we've been forced into work, if you will, or like we defaulted into a career because we had to. And I'm grateful that we've been able to carve our own path by choice, right?
Yes.
So that's great. And I also want you, if you're listening, to pick up on that you can love work. You don't have to feel guilty about it. But if you don't love your work, ask the question Manuela asked the kids. In a perfect world, what kind of career would I really have? Where could I find joy in the skills? Because we all have the same 24 hours in the day in terms of being able to decide what we're going to do, where we can control anyway. We can't control other things, but we can control ourselves. And I'm always like, if we work 60% of our life, which we do just as human beings, we should do something that we love or at least like, right?
Yeah, at least like.
Yeah.
At least like.
So that's so great. So what's your advice for a woman who is seeking to be rich, recognized, and respected? And when I say those words, on their terms, and because rich can mean a lot of things, rich in culture, rich in health, rich in relationships, and of course, financially. And to do what you're doing, to do what we're doing, it takes courage. It takes getting into uncomfortable or sitting on our edges, like maybe even sitting in this chair is for you, because I am a self-proclaimed social introvert.
Same.
Yeah. And so I love people, but sometimes I don't like people. And definitely as a fellow empath, that's more of a draining thing.
Yeah, you have to protect your energy.
100%. So I'm curious, what would you advise them to do? Like, what should they be looking at?
So one is don't go it alone, because I think women tend to do that. They're like, and at times I've known women who are trying to outman the men, which is an interesting thing, because I'm like, we don't have to outman the men. It's just like, be fully you.
Yes.
Is really an important thing. And I also think that just leaning into community is really important. Just having spent time with you and the way you embrace your own culture, your identity, and honor and embrace those of the others around you, so that they're bringing their highest self to the table. It's so impactful, and it doesn't mean that any one person is drained of their energies.
Yes,
so everyone has our motto is little by little, a little becomes a lot, and that is exactly it. So if you have community, you're able to draw the wisdom, the experience, the support of those women around you. And I think it's super important.
Well, I was going to say, you're on the ground working with the kids to create these really empowering yet simple projects, which I love the simplicity of it, because a lot of times we're trying to overcomplicate, even overcomplicating being in a room with fellow women or not, or being alone. We overthinking. You're a Virgo, so I'm sure, your brain's always working. So I'm just curious about how, is it because you love this work so much that you're not afraid? I'm assuming, I'm making an assumption, that you going after funding, even like for the organization, asking people to support it, does it feel natural to you?
No.
Okay, tell me how you get over that.
And so I self-funded the organization for the first decade plus. So that's not my strong suit.
Yes.
Go and ask for funding. But what I realized was, it was so interesting. My daughter was in preschool, and they had this day where everyone wanted to say what they wanted to be when they grew up. And I get the pictures, and my daughters are holding a thing that says CEO. And all the other kids are like gymnasts. And, and I thought, does she know what a CEO is? She's like 4. So I asked her, she's like, well, Mama's a CEO. Oh. And I thought, she's looking at me thinking like, might want to do this. And I thought, oh my God, In a Perfect World has to be here for my kid.
Yeah.
So I needed to be sustainable.
Yeah.
And it's not sustainable for me to go it alone. So I have been very deliberate about making meaningful partnerships. I don't think, as in nonprofits, there's a lot of silos. There are a lot of people doing the same work separately. I'm not one to set up shop and reinvent the wheel next to a great organization. So I'm always looking for collaborations, which then allows us to pool resources and allows us to remain really nimble. So that's one thing. But then we've just in the last couple of years starting to strategically align with corporate partners whose values align with ours, because that's another thing. I'm very particular about who aligns with us, because there have been times when we've been approached by a corporation whose values just don't align with us. And it's clear that they're utilizing our contribution to the world to amplify their
to give them
profile.
a cookie. Yeah, give them a cookie.
And so definitely I steer clear of all that, but really I'm very deliberate. So it does take time to find the right partners. It does take time to get up. And I'm not fearless by any, I think you used the word, I'm not fearless. Courage means I'm scared as hell, but I'm still doing it.
Exactly.
So but really learning to, I can be very much nose to the ground doing the work, because the work is the most important thing to me. So I can grind and grind and grind. But then, as I said, if I want it to be sustainable, I have to look up at some point, tell people what we're doing. So this opportunity is so amazing to just be able to tell our story.
Oh, yeah.
And to get comfortable with telling our story and presenting In a Perfect World to the world. Because I realize now there's a bit of a mindset shift for me that when I'm asking for funding, it's not really about, some outside people funding what we're doing for the goodness of, helping other children or what have you, but really like we're kind of in this together, guys. So you fund us and you're going to have a better world for your own kids. It creates community and it creates an opportunity to just make that change.
Well, I think even the story about your daughter holding up that sign is a great story to tell potential collaborators and partners, because
good point.
What sign is their child holding up? And how can they get those dreams funded, and how are they going to learn more about other humans? Because that's where the healing is, as we also have this divide between artificial intelligence and human intelligence. Human intelligence, we need it more than ever. And our kids who are growing up in a world where they communicate through social media, they're craving connection. They're craving connection.
It's the craziest thing, because it's like there's so much more connection, right? But it's the wrong kind of connection.
Yes.
Right? It's sort of detached. I teach the kids about this. Like, it's so much easier to bully someone or to be mean to someone in a text message. Like, would you be mean to their face?
Right.
Would you say that to their face? No.
Right.
So there's, sometimes a teen will text me and, be a laughing emoji. I'm like, are you laughing? Are you really laughing? I'm just curious. And they're like, oh, you busted. I'm like, well, but I want you to feel real emotions. I don't want you to use these things in place of real feeling. And I think, our sweet spot is Generation Alpha, which is kind of the next. It's the kids who were born, I think it's 2010. Going forward. And they call them the Generation Glass because they were born, I think, in the year that the iPad was invented. So it's like they're all screens. They've only known screens.
Yeah.
And so for my own kids and even the kids in our programs, I'm very deliberate about, we're not using screens to do our programming. We're going to dive into tactile journaling and creating these, art projects just to really get them to dive in, because there's a deeper connection to all of that. And I think that it's so important just to get back to like just raw connection
Yes.
and raw emotion. It's very interesting to see how.
If we lose that, we're kind of a goner, I think. Like,
Yeah, we are.
you know what I mean? So, you're bringing up for me something that happened a couple of weeks ago just in my own house. My husband and I were talking about how it was so fun to play outside. And my son, we've thought he's overheard that. But in that moment, he was really interested in the conversation. He's 8 right now. And he was like, you used to play outside. What did you do? I said, that's a good question. Like, dig in the ground, get dirty, get the neighbors yelling at us because we were like in their yard and messing up their lawn, or like riding our bike down to Pizza Hut when it had a buffet. Now I'm aging myself too, and he was like, ride your bike to Pizza Hut. Doesn't DoorDash do that now? And whatever. Right. And it was crazy because the next day I went downstairs and I was like, where's Noah, my son? And Nate's like, look outside. And he was outside playing with his old Tonka trucks. Nice. And I started just weeping because I couldn't believe that just by telling him a story, he wanted to try it. Because he's always he wants to play his Nintendo Switch. He wants to be in Minecraft. And we try to reduce it anyway, but still, that he went outside and I went out there and I go, are you having fun? He's like, yeah, this is fun.
Yeah, like new world.
Like,
wow.
World and I was like, are you okay? Because you're by yourself. He's like, well, I think next time I want to invite neighbors over and friends. And it was like, because he used to say, why do we have to invite neighbors over? They're at school with me. And so they have really good questions that we, I think, took for granted, maybe because that's just, we didn't have the screens. We didn't have the glass. But I think the more we simply model and talk about that stuff like you're doing through your organization, even as a parent, I'm like, that is so cool. We have a lot to learn about,
we do,
bringing it back to the simplest. Yes.
I mean, it's natural stress relief, number one. But then also, you talk about modeling. It's really a lot easier if we're doing it with the kids. So I say, get your hands dirty.
Yeah, totally. Yes. Well, okay. So what's something that you've had to unlearn on your journey to doing the work you do and how you live?
I can't change the world all by myself. So I tried that. Didn't quite go so well. I did some good stuff, but I was like, oh man. I really started to feel hopeless because I thought, how can I possibly do all the things? And I had this moment. I was in Mumbai in 2008, and I was standing in the middle of a slum visiting. I was volunteering with an organization that was educating children from the slums. When it was after school, they would bring the kids to this private school. And the first day I was there were lots of kids. And then the second or third day, all the girls were missing. And I thought, like, what's happening? So I asked to go where they were from. And so I was in the middle of the slum. And I was really taken aback by the number of social issues concentrated in one area. So there were, young girls that were pregnant or married, child brides, hygiene issues, malnutrition. I mean, alcoholism. There was a lot of stuff. And it was like a movie. I remember standing there feeling like a swirl of, oh, shit. There's like a lot of stuff here.
And as an empath, I bet it was really overwhelming.
It was really, really overwhelming. And I talked to one of the girls' moms. I'm like, where was she today? Why didn't she come? She's like, oh, she's had enough school. It's time for her to come home and help with the family and the baby sister and all that stuff. And I said, but you sent your son to school. Why not send her? And they have, this particular family had different standards for the boys and the girls. But when I talked to the son, I said, what have you learned that you've been going to school? What's something you've learned? And he said something so simple, but he said, I learned not to spit on the ground. I said, okay, what's wrong with spitting on the ground? I said, well, if I spit on the ground, there are germs, and a lot of my people in my family don't have shoes, and they could step on it, and then they come in the house, and then my baby sister who crawls on the floor can get sick. And he connected all these dots. And I said, okay. So I said, so what happened when you told your parents that you learned that? He said they laughed because they didn't quite get the connection of everything. And I said to him, well, you're going to change your family. Do you understand this? Like he's breaking the cycle in front of me. And so I realized in that moment that, okay, I can't change the world, but if I continue to do the work that I do and pour into these kids and they all do their little by little, then it will become a lot because they'll all make their change, whether it's in their family or their school or their neighborhood. And so I was reinvigorated with hope because I felt like, okay, I can't do it all, but I can definitely kind of create some more of me's, I would say, a little bit.
Oh my God. You're like this futuristic mobilizer. Like it's almost like
I don't have.
I
in my
know.
bio.
I just as I see how you see these simple even answers. So you ask simple questions, you get the simple answer, but you connect the dots that what they're doing is so meaningful. And then you're like, okay, let's get on the ground and find more of that, so that we can then create this really cool like amoeba of like awesomeness. I don't know. It's just really cool.
That's a great visual.
Yeah, like I'm seeing it too as you're talking. It's like you see it 20 steps ahead after.
Done.
Yeah,
I see it done.
Yeah, you see it done. Oh, love doers. So let's talk about what you're up to next. What's something going on that you'd like for people to know about, and what you're excited about?
So I really would like to scale what we're doing, which to me means to go from these beautiful moments, mission moments, to movement. And so right now we're small but mighty organization. We do great work, big impact in pockets. And so what I would really like to do is create a system where we can start training others to do what we do, so that we can just let it get out into the world. I mean, it feels so much more. It's always been important, but it just feels so much more urgent now, post-pandemic. I'm like, oh man, the pandemic brought up a lot of things for everyone, and just the urgency of like, we got to get our stuff together, man. Like right now, because there is such a danger of the kids leaning towards apathy where we are, and sort of numbness, and just being bombarded with too much. And I think if we can get in there and start this movement, and really we can't do it. I just know I can't do it myself, and with our small team. But what we can do is send some more people out into the world like us who know how to pour into other kids and to get them activated. In a perfect world army. Let's go build it. That's it. Let's go build it. Let's go show the people. I think what you're doing, why it's so attractive to me. I mean, I just like generosity is one of my highest values, and not because of just giving. It's just the way I was brought up. We just always served the community or in some kind of way. But again, I just love it because it's so potently immediate on the ground, versus when we give to bigger organizations. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but we don't see the beneficiary. Yeah. We don't know how it's helping them. And in your work, we can actually help our local communities quicker, sooner, faster. So thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you. Is there anything else you want to say about it? People ask me all the time how they can help. Yeah. And so we'd love for people to join our community, which is our village. We call it our village because generosity is great and donations are great, but we really want to bring people into what we're doing. And I think there's a meaningful way to look at donations, because when I don't think of them as transactions. I think of like, we're working in partnership. Again, not because you want to help some kids far away that you might never ever meet. Yeah. But because you really want to build a world that your kids can be proud of. So if that's the case, then join us. Our villages we've just soft launched this during the pandemic, and we have to legit launch it like now. But it's a way for people to give, small but meaningful gifts every month, so that it creates some sustainability. Ooh, wait, so like it's like a subscription or a membership to help. To be a I want to help with that. Yeah. I'm 100 million % in, and I will bring the others. Awesome. That's fun because I love giving gifts. It's my love language. And people go, I'm so proud of you, Jen, that you say gifts are your love language. I'm like, totally, because it's not really about receiving gifts. Yep. It's about, I love giving them. I love making people feel delighted. And the biggest gift I feel you can give people is energy and time anyway. But if you can give them something useful, that's amazing. So, agreed. Again, wait. Ooh, I'm so excited. All right. We do this thing called the Femfluence Fire Round. Okay, you ready? Yep. Okay. Favorite book? Oh, man. Empath Survival Guide. Ooh, I got to read that one. I read that every other year. I'm reading it for the 10th time or something. Oh, my gosh. I got to I have never read it. I got to check that out. I'm sending it to you. Okay, thank you. Favorite city, state, country that you've ever visited? Oh, that's tough because I'm really a global citizen. Yeah. I can narrow it down to two. So Lugano, which is kind of the area my family is in Italy, and Aswan, which is in southern Egypt, which is where my ancestry is from. Okay, so funny, right? Every single woman who sat in this chair said Italy. No way.
Somewhere in Italy.
Every time I go to visit my family, like, why don't I live here?
Me too.
I don't quite get why I don't live here.
Me too. That's what's crazy. Nike or Adidas?
Adidas.
Oh, thank you. You're the only
Oh,
one who said
really?
Adidas, and I would choose Adidas too. Like, yes. Not that I don't like Nike. I did actually my senior thesis on it. But
Nice.
Someone you'd like to meet and or be mentored by, living or not.
Yikes. I think I would choose Mahatma Gandhi, which is maybe a cliched answer, but I think I admire his peaceful protest and his courage, but also I love how, and I don't know how many people tune into this, I taught my kids about this, but how Martin Luther King was inspired by him.
Yeah.
And so he birthed great leaders.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm trying to do the same thing. So like any insight would be great.
That makes sense. One word that sums up who you are right now.
Oh, grateful.
Amazing. Well, what's the best way for people to join your movement and help you do things?
Go to iapw.org, click on Our Village, join Our Village because you want to create a world that your kids will be proud of. You'll feel good.
And you'll get to like hang out with people who want to make a difference.
Yes, and be part of our community.
Yeah, and we'll have all that information linked below this video, so it'll be really easy for you to find. Thank you so much for sitting in the chair.
Thank you. I sat in the chair.
Yay! We made it! Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.